Consummate, ultimate, quintessential, I find it hard to get closer. Especially if this thing is not written at all. It is not to be read, or rather, it is not only to be read. It is to be looked at and listened to. Nothing relevant to say, no discoveries, no exhaustive reading, just a different, distant, circumstantial approach. And then, to underline distant, I am not physically present. Today, I am an I from the past, recorded on video to talk and not talk to you. I cannot see you, but you can see my I from the past. I in one shot, with interruptions and mistakes. No editing. Reality is gone, only a video remains. No chance to meet with Mr. Nobel Prize. No academic or expert's authority. A distant reader, a well-trained theater professional, and a female perspective after thinkers like Judith Buttler, Donna Haraway, and post-human studies. In my mind, voice talks to me. Mónica. And I can feel myself in that inner space, in my heart, in my skull, in my rebellious soul. I think of the cavities in my teeth, of decay, of my body scars, all the scars in my body. And I think of the eyes that think. They can see me in a recorded fashion. A small auditorium full of experts, a lot of men with capital M. I am not one. Am I too ignorant or too educated? Nothingness, despair, the limitations of poverty, an artistic perspective of poor people, no money, no dignity, no love, no privileges, no human rights. No need for an Anglo-Saxon point of view when you live in a country like Mexico. I do not think of Beckett as an observer of nothingness, but as an observer of a microscopic human universe. It is about the scale of things and thoughts. Pure drama on the edge of post-drama. As a personal experience, Beckett stays and remains away from me. Even so, at the distance, in time and space, I am curious about the artistic impact of his work, and this opportunity made me raise some questions. Some are philosophical, some about performance, and some about the use of different media to keep the dead online. Questions from a philosophical perspective. Is Samuel Beckett the fallen Anglo-Saxon god of despair? Is it about the downfall of Eurocentric culture? Questions from a performative point of view. Is it about his demand for total authority in artistic production? Is it about his films and videos that allow us to read his work closely, to look again? Is it about his obsession with human interior space? Or about the creation of despicable spacing? If it's about philosophy, I have found old but exciting ideas in Dante, Bruno Vico Joyce, where Beckett quoted Bruno addressing that. There is no difference between the smallest possible chord and the smallest possible arc. No difference between the infinite circle and the straight line. About the maxima and minima of particular, and that minimal heat equals minimal cold. Reading these fragments of an essay written in 1929, if I'm correct, I would like to consider that Beckett worked on liminal spaces that had been mistakenly called nothingness. If you look again, it is not nothingness as much as it is a human nanospace, so tiny that it has been perceived as nothing, and yet configurates a minimal cosmos. As a basic support for my presentation today, I followed some of the ideas formulated by Jonathan Kalb in his book Beckett in Performance, written almost 30 years ago. It is very interesting to read an analysis that eagerly rejected the concept of postmodernism and tried to protect Beckett from being analyzed under such a false perspective. Today, it is my impression, there will be only a few scholars that will still reject the concept of postmodernism and its post-dramatic manifestations. But that might be a different discussion, and I might not be interested in arising it today. I feel gratitude for a chance to present my thoughts in front of you, in my absence, as a paradoxical reader of Beckett, humble and yet arrogant. I participated on the staging of 2 Beckett short plays in 2007. I only have words that aspire to describe what a floating platform did on a vineyard in the Valle de Guadalupe for an open sky production of Beckett's Rockabye and Footfalls. Rockabye and Footfalls were performed on August the 6th, 2007 at Casa de Piedra, Baja California, Mexico. Directed by Antonio Castro, with sound pieces by Manuel Rocha, performed by Tina French, and designed by Mónica Raya. Las Fiestas de la Vendimia take place in el Valle de Guadalupe to celebrate food and wine once a year in Mexican Baja. Antonio Castro and I, a married couple then, were invited by Manuel Rocha to participate in the event with a performance that was supposed to compete artistically with massive concerts of Mexican pop singers and orchestras. Antonio decided to stage 2 Beckett short plays and present them as a contrast to the usual festivities. He invited Tina French to play Rockabye and Footfalls. There was a reduced space to be designed, and I imagined the scenery as a floating hallway on the surface of the vineyard. The task was not going to be easy, because there was no theater building, no professional technicians, but the usually improvised Mexican-style solutions. The weather was sunny and humid. The performance would be staged at night and in the open fields. The seat area would be installed far from Tina's platform and at a certain height given by the terrain, so she could be seen and heard out by the power of sound speakers. We had not a technical director to help us, but a nice countryman with a hammer, some wood, and a saw. The floating platform was precarious but firm, so Tina could safely work on top. Very few lights were used to illuminate Tina's body, so she would be perceived as floating on air. This performance became a brave proposal with a unique solution, a very different kind of entertainment. Because of the ontological nature of the festival, wine was offered in every stop of the gastronomical tour. When our audience came, most of them were already under the effects of the tour and were welcome to try and compare the wine of the house. It was hard to imagine how a drunk audience would behave under our intellectual prerogatives. The audience were taken to their seats and invited to focus on the floating female that walked back and forth in the distance. I watched the performance further away, from a small house on the top of the hill, so I could see Tina's raft floating on the surface of a dark sea, and in a second area, the group of people that attended the event. On the contrary of what I expected, once Tina started, the audience remained attentive and quiet. The performance took 30 minutes or so. When we came down, most of the audience members were further under the effects of Casa de Piedra's wine, but also under the effects of the experience of the performance. Rocha's soundscapes affected them as well. There were dancing words, a black open sky, and the obscure destiny of a floating woman. Folk life. I was eager to hear them talk about the show. They seemed emotionally moved and started to share with each other very personal feelings and memories. I kept on walking to approach Tina and help her undress in our improvised changing room. People in line were standing respectfully to have a chance to talk to her. In my memory, when she came out, she stood like a priest, listening to people's confessions. People came to thank her and share their own very intimate experiences and thoughts. After the long line was finished, they left with full spirit and ready for the next party on the next vineyard. We, the artistic crew, had wine and food as well. There was no chance to make records of our work. There were no drawings, no plans or videos. Only our individual memories and the hat and the coat of Tina's costume. What should we learn about Beckett in a fiesta country like ours? What kind of Godot could we be waiting for? What is our end game? My perspective about Beckett comes from my own heuristic thinking. I am for the interpretation of Beckett's texts without assigning meaning, to play them more under the erotism of art, according to Susan Sontag. The intellectual is only one of several faculties called into play by Beckett's performances. Alan Schneider already noticed that the audiences that come to Beckett's plays are, and I quote, middle class, non-intellectual, non-aficionados, and that Beckett's plays are fantastically clear to college students. End of quote. In his famous essay about scenic presence, Alain Grove-Rillet wrote about, and I quote, elusive beings who always refuse to enter into their own existence. End of quote. He also talked about Lewis Carroll and Alfred Jarry, suggesting, in a sharp provocation, that thinking is not the worst. I believe that the language of our contemporary perception is now sufficient to take Beckett in. According to Jonathan Kalb, in Beckett's performance, we see clowning against silence, jokes and gags that are perfectly executed. The stage becomes an aquarium with unexpected words and histories. Movement is extremely calculated and separated from speech under a strict rule. As a director, Beckett did not develop unique staging techniques. He did not publish an extended theory of theater or drama, or established an authorized style of acting. The ambiguity and uncertainty of his work has become a positive performance value. My favorite Beckett play is Not I, which can be experienced online whenever you feel like it. It is said that Billy Whitelaw called it a state of mind, a space with a trapped audience in a full darkness, unable to escape. Billy Whitelaw insisted that interpretation had nothing to do with her work. She never did any of his plays without him. Following Kalb analysis, I was not surprised to learn that Beckett has frequently been accused of social irrelevance. I quote, of whining portraits of hopelessness and overly formalistic and elitist proofs of the futility of individualism. According to critic Kato Gulicke-Weiler, Beckett represents the self-disintegration of the bourgeois world and its absurd drama. In the same critical approach, Emeritus Professor Darko Suvin wrote an essay in 1967 where he argued that Beckett had, and I quote, a dramatic vision of a particular cultural circle that makes some people find his theater uninteresting. End of quote. Suvin pointed out that Beckett's world is a closed one, that it is and it is not a living world, a life in death or death in life. He understood the Beckettian cosmos as a closed system and the degradation of its energy, with its characters playing existential games as some clownish victims immersed in the horrors of the self. I have to tell you that as a Mexican female artist, I feel very much the same. Maybe because of a newly acquired sympathy for a post-colonial vision of the world, one that makes me distant from a bunch of old, whining, white dudes. Cobb also considered that Beckett's plays became a kind of religious theater. I quote, one which requires a holy actor no less than Artaud or Grotowski. One where the notion of character is forfeited and where there is something other than impersonation of a given fictional figure. End of quote. I still feel that the effort leaves me uninterested. Maybe because I already move in a perceptual framework in which humanism is thought not to be the prevailing ethos. Finally, I have to admit I really felt fascination when I watched some of the original TV pieces available on YouTube. It is safe to say that Beckett created scenes to make the senses dance. Kalb interprets them as some effort to move away from language, but I confirm that Beckett was also interested in working on a molecular scale, one that is pathetically individual and sentimentalist. Look again is one of my favorite quotes, not only at the image before you, but at the way you looked at the first time. The materials online allow you to do just that. Maybe that's a good advice, to look again at 2,000 years of Western history. Finished, nearly finished. So I will end my irrelevant participation with a Beckett recommendation. Dance first, think later. It is the natural order. Thank you very much.